Ms. Lane, are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this case? The judge asked, adjusting his glasses as he peered down at the young woman standing at the plaintiff's table. Samantha Lane, a 26-year-old waitress in a modest navy blue dress, nodded firmly. Yes, Your Honor. I have no doubt. Across the courtroom, Nathan Sterling, a self-made millionaire and owner of one of the most exclusive restaurant chains in the country, leaned back in his chair. A smirk curled on his lips as he exchanged a glance with his high-powered attorney. This is a joke, he muttered under his breath. A desperate waitress trying to squeeze money out of me. She doesn't stand a chance. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. Very well. Ms. Lane, you may present your case. Samantha took a deep breath, gripping the edges of the table to steady herself. Then, in a voice that rang clear across the silent courtroom, she dropped the first bombshell. I am suing Mr. Sterling for wrongful termination, workplace harassment, and fraud. And, Your Honor, she turned to face Nathan directly, her gaze unwavering. I have evidence that will destroy his entire empire. The smirk on Nathan's face vanished. A hush fell over the courtroom. Nathan Sterling, once relaxed and arrogant, now narrowed his eyes at Samantha. His fingers drummed against the table as his lawyer whispered something in his ear. Evidence? He scoffed, masking his unease. I don't know what kind of stunt you're trying to pull, but this is laughable. Samantha ignored him and handed a thick folder to her attorney, Daniel Carter, a sharp and relentless lawyer known for taking on impossible cases. Daniel stood and walked toward the judge. Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to introduce Exhibit A, confidential emails and internal documents, proving that Mr. Sterling's restaurant chain has been falsifying wages, stealing employee tips, and retaliating against staff who questioned their illegal practices. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Nathan stiffened, his confident exterior starting to crack. That's ridiculous, he snapped, leaning forward. She's making this up. But Samantha wasn't finished. Her heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. And there's more, she continued. Not only did Mr. Sterling fire me for confronting management about stolen wages, but he also personally threatened me, on camera. A stunned silence filled the air. The judge arched an eyebrow. You have a recording? Samantha reached into her purse, pulling out a USB drive. Yes, Your Honor, and once you see it, there will be no doubt about the truth. Nathan's face drained of color. He glanced at his lawyer, but for the first time, his attorney had no smug reassurance to offer. Samantha watched him carefully. Checkmate, Nathan Sterling. You messed with the wrong waitress. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode. All eyes were on the judge as he took the USB drive from Samantha's lawyer and handed it to the court clerk. Within moments, the screen in the courtroom flickered to life. The video began inside one of Nathan Sterling's high-end restaurants, where Samantha stood in the employee break room, arms crossed, facing the manager. You can't do this, her voice rang out through the speakers. You're stealing from us, taking our tips, cutting our hours, and changing payroll records. I have proof. The manager scoffed. Take it up with the boss. Then the door swung open. In walked Nathan Sterling himself. So, you're the one stirring up trouble, he sneered. Let me explain something to you, sweetheart. This is my business, my money, and if you don't like how things are done, you can get the hell out. Samantha's recorded self squared her shoulders. You can't just fire me for speaking up. Nathan chuckled darkly. Watch me. And then came the words that sealed his fate. If you even think about running to the labor board, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. You'll be blacklisted. No restaurant, no hotel, no cafe will ever hire you. You'll be begging on the streets before I'm done with you. The courtroom was dead silent. The video stopped. Nathan sat frozen, his face drained of all color. His lawyer cleared his throat, struggling for words, but the damage was done. The judge exhaled heavily. "Mr. Sterling, do you deny the authenticity of this video?" Nathan's jaw clenched, his mind scrambling for a way out. Samantha crossed her arms. "I warned you, Nathan. You picked the wrong person to bully." Nathan Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his once arrogant demeanor shattered. His lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but Nathan wasn't listening. He was too busy watching his empire crumble before his eyes. The judge turned towards Samantha's lawyer. "Mr. Carter, do you have further evidence?" Daniel Carter nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. In addition to the video, we have payroll records that show systematic wage theft, testimonies from multiple employees, and email correspondence where Mr. Sterling approved falsifying financial reports." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The journalists in the gallery scribbled notes furiously, while Nathan's PR team exchanged horrified looks. Nathan bolted to his feet. "This is a setup," he barked. "She's lying. Sit down, Mr. Sterling," the judge said firmly, "or I will hold you in contempt of court." Nathan slumped back into his seat, his face beet red. Samantha, however, wasn't done. "I spent years working at your restaurants, watching you get richer while your employees struggled to afford rent," she said, her voice steady. "You thought we were disposable, but today you learn that no one is above the law." The judge folded his hands. "Given the overwhelming evidence, I will be ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Furthermore, this case will be referred to the Labor Board and the Attorney General's office for further investigation into possible criminal activity." Gasps filled the courtroom. Nathan's lawyer turned pale. "Your Honor, Court is adjourned," the judge declared, slamming the gavel down. Samantha turned to see Nathan's entire world falling apart. He was no longer the smug billionaire who had once laughed in her face. Now he was just another fraud being exposed. As she walked out of the courtroom, a flood of reporters surrounded her. "Miss Lewis, how does it feel to take down a millionaire?" Samantha smiled. Justice always wins in the end. Nathan Sterling stormed out of the courtroom, his hands clenched into fists. The flashing cameras and relentless questions from reporters made his head pound. His lawyer trailed behind him, talking into his phone with a frantic urgency that made it clear. This was a disaster. "Nathan, we need to get ahead of this. Damage control." "Shut up," Nathan hissed. He shoved past the crowd and into his waiting car, but before the driver could pull away, a reporter's voice rang out above the noise. "Mr. Sterling, how do you respond to the Labor Board launching a full-scale investigation into your business practices?" Nathan's heart stopped. "What?" he snapped, rolling down the tinted window. The reporter held up his phone, already broadcasting live. "The Labor Board just released a statement. Your entire restaurant chain is under investigation for fraud, wage theft, and labor violations. Several of your managers are already cooperating with authorities. Any comment?" Nathan's stomach twisted. He grabbed his phone and frantically scrolled through his notifications. Emails, missed calls, messages from his business partners. One stood out: "We're pulling our investment. Effective immediately." His empire was collapsing. Meanwhile, Samantha stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by a sea of journalists. "Miss Lewis, what's next for you?" one asked. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of victory settle in. "I'm not stopping here. This case wasn't just about me. It was about every worker who's been silenced by people like Nathan Sterling. And I promise you, this is just the beginning." The crowd erupted in cheers, and for the first time in years, Samantha felt something she thought she'd lost: hope. Nathan paced inside his penthouse office, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. His lawyer, Brian Calloway, sat stiffly across from him, flipping through a stack of legal documents. "Tell me this isn't as bad as it looks," Nathan demanded. Brian exhaled sharply. It's worse. He tossed a file onto Nathan's desk. The Labor Board isn't just investigating. You're facing a full federal probe. If they find enough evidence, you could be looking at criminal charges. Nathan's face twisted with rage. They can't pin anything on me. This is just a smear campaign by that damn waitress. Brian shook his head. Samantha Lewis had proof. Emails, financial records, employee testimonies. This isn't a rumor, Nathan. It's a case. Nathan yanked at his tie, feeling like he was suffocating. Then fix it. It's not that simple, Brian said, leaning forward. We've already lost major investors. The board is holding an emergency meeting tomorrow, and word is they want you out. Nathan scoffed. They wouldn't dare. Brian's silence said otherwise. Samantha sat at her tiny kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee. The newspaper in front of her had a bold headline. Sterling Restaurants under federal investigation. CEO faces potential charges. A smile tugged at her lips. Her phone buzzed. It was Daniel Carter, her lawyer. Samantha, I just got a call from the Labor Board. They want you to testify before Congress about unethical labor practices. Her eyes widened. Me? You exposed one of the biggest corporate frauds in years. They want your voice. Samantha's grip tightened around her coffee cup. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about change. Tell them I'll do it. Nathan sat in his dimly lit office, the glow of his laptop screen reflecting off his furrowed brow. His phone buzzed incessantly, calls from investors, lawyers, and board members demanding answers. His reputation was in ruins, and with the Labor Board's investigation intensifying, he knew he had one last move to play. He dialed a number. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered. Didn't expect to hear from you, Sterling. I need dirt on Samantha Lewis. Nathan's voice was low, controlled. Anything. A scandal. A secret. Something to ruin her credibility. The man on the other end chuckled darkly. You're desperate, huh? Nathan gritted his teeth. Can you do it or not? I'll see what I can find, but it'll cost you. Nathan didn't hesitate. Do it. He ended the call and leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. If he could discredit Samantha, he might be able to shift public opinion. He just needed something, anything, to make people doubt her. The next morning, Samantha woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through social media. Breaking. Waitress who sued Nathan Sterling has a dark past. False accusations, manipulated photos, and outright lies were spreading like wildfire. Claims that she had stolen money from a previous employer, that she had fabricated evidence against Nathan. None of it was true, but the internet didn't care. Her hands trembled as she called Daniel. Did you see what they're saying about me? She asked, panic creeping into her voice. I saw, Daniel replied grimly. Nathan's pulling every dirty trick in the book, but don't worry, we can fight this. Samantha clenched her jaw. She had come too far to be silenced now. Let's take him down for good. Samantha sat in Daniel's office, her laptop open in front of her. News articles filled the screen, all repeating the same false accusations against her. But she refused to back down. We need to hit back, and hard, Daniel said. Nathan's trying to destroy your credibility before the congressional hearing. If we don't act now, his lies might stick. Samantha exhaled sharply. What can we do? Daniel leaned forward. We prove that he's behind the smear campaign. If we can link these fake stories to him, we can destroy his last hope of salvaging his career. Samantha nodded. Let's do it. That night, Samantha's email pinged with an anonymous message. The subject line read, I have proof. She hesitated for a moment, then clicked it open. Nathan Sterling paid a private investigator to dig up dirt on you. When he found nothing, They fabricated the accusations. I have the payment records, emails, and proof. I can testify. Let me know if you're interested. A friend. Samantha's pulse raced. This is it. She forwarded the email to Daniel. We just got our smoking gun. The next morning, major news outlets ran the headline, "Leaked documents reveal Nathan Sterling's attempt to smear former employee." Nathan's face was plastered across every news channel. Social media exploded with outrage. His company's stock plummeted, and investors started pulling out at an alarming rate. Inside his office, Nathan threw his phone against the wall. "How the hell did this happen?" he shouted at Brian. Brian shook his head. "You lost, Nathan. The board just voted. You're out as CEO." Nathan's world came crashing down. Samantha stood before the congressional committee, cameras flashing around her. She took a deep breath, then spoke into the microphone. For years, companies like Sterling's have exploited workers, silencing them with money and intimidation. But today, I stand here to say, no more. Applause erupted in the room. Nathan watched from his television at home, his face pale. He had lost everything. Samantha had won. Months later, Samantha sat in a cafe, sipping her coffee. She had started a new organization to protect workers from corporate abuse. A news segment played on the TV in the background. Former CEO Nathan Sterling sentenced to 5 years for fraud and corruption. Samantha smiled. Justice had been served. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked, sitting across from her. Samantha nodded. "I am." Her fight wasn't over. It was just beginning.